Welcome to the Well-Oiled Mind. If you've not been here before, we specialize in history, biography, psychology, and philosophy. We like to focus on these topics within a European context, and we cover subjects ranging from antiquity to the 20th century. Join us and illuminate your life. Now, let's get to our video. Well, here we are. We finally arrived at the end of our review of Rome's top 5 generals. Today, we unveil the general in first place. Let's briefly review the preceding 4. We started with Germanicus, the youthful phenom who died at the age of only 34. Germanicus lived up to his name and smashed Germanic tribes in 3 major campaigns. His bludgeoning of the tribesmen went a long way in healing the Roman psyche following the Varus disaster in 9 AD. Germanicus was followed by Trajan. While Germanicus made a name for himself in Germania, Trajan's fields of glory were primarily in Dacia, where he ravaged that region, hauled in untold booty, and pushed Rome to its greatest territorial expanse. Like other Romans, he challenged the mighty Parthian Empire too, and did some damage there, but this campaign was less conclusive, and his death soon after gave a sense of anticlimax to his efforts. The famous Julius Caesar was next on our rundown. Caesar made a name for himself first in Gaul, where he conquered vast swathes of the European mainland north of the Alps, and then again during the infamous civil war against Pompey and the rightful Senate. His victory at Alesia remains a military masterstroke, and his boldness in the internecine struggles in Italy, the Balkans, and Greece would have made Alexander smile. Marius followed Caesar, but scoring-wise, the two actually tied in our reckoning. Marius too battled Germanic tribes and bested them. He also fought in the inhospitable regions of North Africa in the Jugurthine War, and like Caesar, was involved in a massive civil war. Marius' efforts in Germania and North Africa shored up Rome's northern and southern flanks and gave Rome stability vis-a-vis external threats. And now we arrive at the general in first place. Before we unveil him, please note that our scoring methodology is described in detail in the videos on Germanicus, Trajan, and Caesar, so we recommend you go back and review those videos to understand our method. Now, let's get to our first place finisher. Our top general is Publius Cornelius Scipio Africanus. Scipio lived from 236 to 183 BC. The geopolitical context for all his military service is the Second Punic War, which raged from 218 to 201 BC. Scipio's claim to lasting fame is that he vanquished the scourge of Rome, the mighty and terrible Hannibal Barca, military leader of Rome's first major antagonist in the Mediterranean, the great trading empire of Carthage. Scipio started his military career in earnest in Hispania, modern-day Spain, campaigning with his father and uncle. However, it is possible that as a teenager he was also actually present at 2 earlier major Roman defeats, the Battle of Trebia in 218 BC and the Battle of Lake Trasimene in 217 BC. We know with certainty that he was at the ultimate battle of Roman annihilation and disgrace, Cannae, where 60 to 70,000 legionnaires were slaughtered in a single day. After he and some survivors had collected themselves at a nearby village, Scipio prevented a tiny clutch of senior Romans in the crowd from deserting. He cursed them, threatened their lives, and further made them swear to defend Rome. Justly berated, and now recommitted by Scipio's bold and brave defiance in the wake of a literal bloodbath, the tiny group rejoined the war. He did all this at the meager age of 20. From 218 to around 212 BC, Scipio's family conducted operations in northeastern Hispania, essentially contesting Carthaginian rule there and significantly frustrating Carthaginian attempts to reinforce and resupply Hannibal in Italy through the overland routes. In separate battles in 211 BC, Scipio's father and uncle and their forces were wiped out by Carthaginian units. Both brothers perished in the fighting. Of note, it was Hannibal's brothers who killed Scipio's father and uncle. This was more than just a war for Scipio now. It was a blood feud. In 210 BC, following these grave losses, Scipio was made commander of Roman forces in Hispania. Scipio was well aware of the skill of the Barca family in the waging of combat, and that their army, as it were, was actually split into 3 smaller contingent armies. It therefore made sense to Scipio to take on these three groups one at a time. So, rather than immediately challenge all of the Carthaginians in a massive pitched battle, Scipio besieged Carthago Nova, modern-day Cartagena, but known to the Romans as New Carthage. This city was the major logistics base for Carthage and Hispania and allowed great freedom of action and support to the Carthaginian forces in Iberia. Scipio took the city in 209 BC and captured Hannibal's brother, Mago, in the effort. His victory in part was due to a bold maneuver that involved timing an infantry advance across a tidal lagoon at low tide which limited access to the city. He told his superstitious troops that he had received a divine vision telling him this was a rightly guided action, and it worked. The seizure of New Carthage was a major blow to the Carthaginians and demonstrated two things about Scipio. He was possessed of a flexible mindset and realized that a nose-to-nose slugfest was not necessary or even recommended. Secondly, unlike Marius facing Jugurtha and his Numidians, Scipio realized the war with Carthage and Hannibal was all about the long game. There was not going to be a quick way out of this contest. His subsequent campaigning strategies illustrate this very clearly. The next year, Scipio sought battle with another sub-element of the Carthaginian forces. He chased this force into Italy, where other Roman units decisively won the Battle of Metaurus, killing Hannibal's brother Hasdrubal in the slaughter. This battle, made possible by Scipio's actions in Hispania, basically ended attempts of Carthage to reinforce Hannibal in Italy. As such, bereft of reliable supplies, Hannibal's time on the Italian peninsula, according to some historians, was now destined to end very shortly. In 206 BC, Scipio fought a final battle in Hispania, won it, and basically pushed the Carthaginians out of the peninsula for good. The rest of 206 was spent pacifying Hispania, for there were some tribes which had been in the Carthaginian camp, and there were some remnants of the Barca brothers' forces. In 205 BC, Scipio's power increased further when he was elected to the consulship and sent his request to Sicily to prepare an invasion of Africa. Like we have seen from other generals, he devoted a great amount of time and energy in assembling the logistics to support his campaign. Additionally, Scipio had to construct a fleet capable of ferrying his forces across the Mediterranean to Africa. This was a huge risk, as the Carthaginian navy was a major force to be reckoned with, since as a trading empire, their navy was highly capable, experienced, and very large. Late in 205 BC, Scipio finally attacked into Africa. He chose for his debarkation point the Carthaginian port of Utica. Just as he had done in Hispania, he again took what military strategists call the, quote, indirect approach, unquote. Rather than directly confronting the Carthaginian field army, Scipio sought to choke off sustenance and reduce support to the region by besieging the port. In all of Scipio's campaigns, we see a very conscious, calculated approach. He methodically set conditions before all of his battles. We never see him rush incautiously or try and force a victory. In Scipio, we see a leader who squeezed his opponent slowly, wrenching the initiative away in a deliberate process, versus desperately or rashly looking for a single knockout blow before the ground was prepared. Scipio's bold actions, which included reinstalling local leaders to be his allies, an overwhelmingly successful night attack at Utica, and one major conventional victory at the Battle of the Great Plains in 203 BC, unnerved the Carthaginian leadership. In response, therefore, they actually sent word to Hannibal, who was still rampaging around Italy, to return to Africa. Meanwhile, in imitation of one of Scipio's own tactics, the Carthaginians used their powerful fleet to try and interdict Scipio's logistics lines back to Sicily and Rome. Hostilities dragged on for the next year or so, being interrupted from time to time by insincere peace overtures by both sides. Frustrating Scipio's plans were political intrigues against him back in Rome, where jealous rivals schemed to see him replaced, lest he gain too much prestige. Scipio somehow managed to resist his political enemies in Italy and eventually brought Hannibal to battle in 202 BC at Zama in modern-day Tunisia. Scipio deftly used the restored Numidian prince Massinissa and his elite light cavalry to aid in his victory with a crushing charge from behind. The battle was a hard-fought affair, with each side breaking the other's lines at certain points. The Carthaginians even employed up to 80 war elephants, though these dread beasts seem to have actually damaged the Carthaginians more than the Romans, when, in panic, they reversed course and charged back into Hannibal's own lines. Now, let's review our scoring. Scipio's skill at war, gleaned from long years of service and a cool head, combined with Roman ruggedness and the aid of allies, saw the Romans prevail against one of the greatest war captains of all time, Hannibal Barca. To prove this point, Scipio was given a triumph in Rome, the ultimate honor for a Roman general. He was also bestowed with the honorific Africanus, denoting that it was he who had conquered Africa, meaning Hannibal in fact. Scipio, though baptized in crushing defeat as a mere youth, clearly matured into a highly competent and victorious general, so we give him a resounding 3 points here. Did Scipio seize opportunities, though? Well, we believe he did. The crossing of the tidal marsh at New Carthage is one great example, as is employing Massinissa and his fleet cavalry, especially considering that this prince had previously fought for the Carthaginians. Moreover, in separating him from the herd, he avoided illusory opportunities. Upon landing in North Africa, many commanders might have tried to force a battle. Scipio patiently developed the situation to his advantage first, then he sought battle. 3 points. Scipio was highly anticipatory, especially in forecasting logistics, which seems to be a theme among all the greats. So again, a score of 3. Scipio adapted new units and adjusted to the situations that faced him very well. Most impressive of all was his willingness to adapt his strategy in light of the genius he faced in the person of Hannibal. Scipio seemed to always try and degrade his enemies first, then strike. We think he easily earns 3 points here. Scipio was absolutely inspiring. The tale of his actions after Cannae is epic. We have to imagine the carnage that he and the other survivors had just witnessed. 60 to 70,000 men were killed in the space of about 2 or 3 square miles on a single day. Let's take one of the lower Roman casualty figures of 60,000. If one half of those, and the number was probably much higher, died from exsanguination, there realistically could have been over 22,000 gallons of Roman blood spilled on the plain of Cannae. Keep in mind, it was much likely more, and bear in mind that about 8,000 Carthaginian troops also perished. The place would have been a gruesome industrial-scale abattoir. The smell of iron in the air would have been overpowering. It would have been mingled with dust, the fetid, sour odor of over 140,000 unwashed men, and the feces and viscera of disemboweled soldiers and animals. This unprecedented slaughter occurred in July or August. The heat would have been oppressive and made the place reek even more. What kind of man, what kind of 20-year-old could rally men after something like this? Scipio did, and seemed to do so with a natural ease. Obviously, earning 3 points here. The lasting impact that Scipio had on the army was substantial. One anecdotal item of evidence for this judgment is the hat tip that Hannibal gave to Scipio when he ranked him as one of the great generals in history. More specifically, he introduced tactics that, although not necessarily new, like opening lines and infantry ranks to allow quadrupeds to pass through, certainly did achieve some level of permanence in the institutional culture of the army. The same can be said for his theory of victory against Carthage, that is, a long strategy of indirect approaches designed to wither an opponent before a battle, not during. Lastly, using his political powers accumulated after Zama, Scipio advocated for certain support, rewards, and incentives for former soldiers. 3 points yet again. In sum, Scipio did not have the flair or panache of a Caesar or Pompey. Perhaps because he had seen so much slaughter, he decided to take a more economical approach to campaigning in terms of expending men's lives. Did his deliberate methods prolong the war, or were they simply an acknowledgement of the strategic situation, the vast Carthaginian capacity, and the military brilliance of their supreme general Hannibal? We think the latter. In the end, Scipio Africanus, through his own high-order skill and generalship, brought an end to the terror of Rome by decisively defeating one of the most brilliant military leaders in all of history. Scipio has a perfect score of 21 out of 21 points. We hope you've enjoyed our rundown today in the Bringers of Destiny series. We would love to hear your feedback on our arrangement of these 5 Roman generals who we're rating among the best. We would especially like to hear your ideas for runners-up. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope that if you like what you saw and heard today, you'll give us a like and a subscribe. Take care, and remember, knowledge is its own reward.